Hi, everyone. Ed Bixby here from the Global Green Burial Alliance, and this is Spotlight Now. Today, I'm sitting here with Bob Hendrikx, who is the founder of Loop Biotech and inventor of the living coffin that enriches nature. He believes in fundamentally transforming the relationship between humanity and the natural world by collaborating with living organisms. Bob envisions a future where everyday objects come to life, where planted homes, living coffins, and trash-eating bins become a reality. Bob has been chosen as Human of the Year 2020 by Vice Media and has been featured on international platforms such as CNN, TEDx, BBC, WWF, and many others. So welcome, Bob.
Nice. That's a great introduction. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm sure I'm excited to talk to you, and I'm sure our consumers and everyone else are really, curious and interested in what you're doing. So why don't we get started by learning a little bit more about how Loop came to be and what inspired you? And I think you might even have a business partner, so I don't want to leave that person out, uh,
Yeah,
uh, you know, to create the mycelium burial product.
yeah, of course. So it was actually my graduation project from the Delft University of Technology. So it went a little bit out of hand on a positive note. And I was doing research towards trying to create products that allow us to become a positive footprint species, which is quite a big challenge. I looked a lot about nature, like how is nature growing stuff, and I was really fascinated by the mushroom, like how big it is and how it's like out of nothing something pops out of the soil. It just fascinated me, and I started learning, and you could grow materials from it. I was like, wow, this is super interesting. And especially since my name is Bob and I studied architecture, I, of course, wanted to build something with it. So, Bob the Builder. And I started growing mushroom homes. So, it was actually my graduation project. But afterwards, I learned a little bit more that it's not about only the human perspective. So, I wanted to do something, but also around the what it's a really weird question to say. My professors weren't very fond of it, but I asked the question, what does the mushroom want? And I looked a little bit deeper, released my inner David Attenborough, and learned hey, mushrooms live in the soil. They're nature's biggest recycler. They continuously transform dead organic matter into new plant food, allowing new life to thrive. I was like, oh my God, that's its role in nature. How can we facilitate that? What kind of products do we actually use as humans in the soil? I was like, oh my God, a casket. And that's the whole process. So I had zero intentions to build a casket, but I just listening to nature. What does this organism want to be for such a product? It happened, and that was now almost 4 years ago. And yeah, since then we just started making prototypes, bearing the first people, getting a lot of media attention, and learning like, hey, people actually want this, and also learning how polluting the funeral industry is. That we're really, yeah, empowering people to leave a positive footprint instead of having a negative footprint.
Absolutely. And Bob, it sounds to me like you've gotten into this business like most of us in this movement have gotten into it just by happenstance, and then you find a passion for it. And for the viewers, to understand the importance of mycelium, like Bob had said, you know, uh, we had many great extinctions in this Earth's lifetime, and during one of those great extinctions, if it wasn't for mycelium taking over the Earth after that, we may not be here. So we have a lot of things to thank mycelium for. And with that being said, Bob, how did you go about designing the loop living coffin? And can you tell us a little bit more about the growing process and how this coffin works?
Yeah, of course. So, especially since our vision is enriching life after death, becoming part of the cycle again, feeding nature, we found it very fit to create an organic shape that more represents the forms of nature. Since we grow everything in molds, we have that freedom of doing that. So we're very happy with that. The growing process is goes sort of as follows. It almost feels like we're sort of cooking. So also when people come here, we don't call it a factory, we call it a growing facility. We're growing organisms, and indeed per accident they're in the shape of a casket. But we're growing organisms and putting them back in the natural habitat. And how does that work? We mix upcycled hemp fiber, which is a local waste stream. we mix it together with mycelium. Mycelium is like the root structure of mushrooms. We place them together in a mold, and in just simply 7 days, the mycelium will start to activate because we put it in the right growing conditions, certain temperature, humidity, CO2, oxygen. There's a whole research behind it. But then simply the mycelium get activated and does what it does best in nature, transforming that organic matter into plant food. So basically binding everything together with all the mycelium networks. After 7 days, we stop that process and we, how do you say this? We extract the moisture out of it. So basically drying it, not killing it, but keeping it bioactive. What then happens, it releases a certain protein, which is similar to when, for example, you go into the forest, you find a mushroom and it's like super squishy, but if you take it home, it becomes really hard. It's that exact same process, and that's why it's fully functional and it can carry up to 200 kilograms. What is that in LBS? I should have known, but I don't know now from the top of my head. But it's like a lot. So we can continue eating.
No, absolutely. It's really an incredible process, and I know that there have been quite a few products that have come and gone in the last few years that people were they were touting mycelium like the mushroom suit, let's say, for instance. And I think they were onto something they didn't know how to effectively, perform or get that past the finish line. You guys absolutely have perfected it, which I think is wonderful. And with that, how have you tested its effectiveness when it comes to the duration as to which it degrades? I understand it decomposes an average of 45 days.
Yeah, so it's basically super simple. When the product is finished, you put it in the soil, and in the soil, it will biodegrade itself because simply the mycelium is active and starts to eat like all the hemp fibers. Biodegrading in the ideal conditions in 45 days. Say the conditions are not ideal, it's like 2 to 3 months. If you compare it to like a regular casket, it's going to take like 10, 20, 30 years. So either way, it's going to be a big difference. What happens is basically mycelium from its natural origin has a lot of carbon and energy resources. So basically food for the local ecosystem. So if you put this in the soil, you actually don't even need the body. There's a whole new business out there for us in just revitalizing soil. It's what farmers have done for many years. When they were mushroom farmers, they put the leftovers on the land and it fertilizes the land. So basically you're fertilizing the soil. And that said, this will help to facilitate the decomposition process of the human body. Like mushrooms don't eat meat, but they fertilize the surrounding area, and that will attract different kinds of bacteria and other microorganisms, and they will help facilitate the decomposition process. So basically you're putting it in the soil, making it more healthy, and they're saying like, guys, here's the food, come over here.
No, that's a great way to explain it. And I'm glad you touched on a few things there, in particular, like, the environment that you place this in.
Yeah,
Certainly we have humidity, we have desert, we have all these different environments across the world. So people do need to understand that. But of course, mycelium exists in all these types of places. So, it's important for
yeah,
people to realize. And you're right also too. I'm glad you brought up a point which is interesting about composting. Mushrooms don't eat meat. There are certain things that, so we allow those other organisms to do the job for us. So thanks for
exactly.
that explanation, Bob. I
Yeah.
understand you offer additional products like the Earthrise Urn. Can you tell us a little bit more about these offerings?
Yeah, of course. So we have the casket. That's how it all started, especially from coming, from the Earth going back to the Earth. But learning as a youngster that almost like 80 or 70%, I don't know what's the exact number now in the US, but it can be quite high, wishes to be cremated. So we said, okay, first of all, we have to make sure our casket is also being suitable for cremation, which it is now. Because even if people don't want to go in the soil, they still need to have a sustainable option in terms of production process, and growing something in 7 days comparing to like a healthy tree that grow for like 40 years. Yeah, it is easy. What are you going to burn? And then we thought, okay, we still want to put mycelium back in the soil. So if we can create an earth rise, that's our urn, our mushroom urn, People can fill it up. We have a lid on top of it, and there's a cavity in it, and you can put a plant in it. So you can basically continue to grow into some new form, which we thought is actually quite a nice feeling. We don't like to talk a lot about that is the end, which is a little bit more different of traditional approach. We feel like, I think, just like you and people probably watching, it's a circle, and we have achieved sort of, and we're giving back, and we're trying to facilitate that giving back situation.
Absolutely, and point well taken. Death is not, in my opinion, in the end, it's the beginning of something new. So
Yeah,
you guys are offering that jump start to that new beginning. And I have a question myself, actually. And I think the consumer and our providers would probably ask the same. What is the recommended depth, let's say, for instance, for when you actually place someone in one of your loop coffins and inter it? Is there a recommended or preferred depth for this to activate at a better process?
no, I mean, in terms of depth, like the more oxygen, the better in terms for plant growth, decomposition process. So that's the general rule, sort of, for nature, for most process, I would say. So the more shallow you can go, the better for the natural processes. Like in Europe, there are a lot of regulations, as you probably are aware. So it just differs per country, and then you have different levels. Most burials are at 1.2 meters. I don't know how that translates to inches, etc. But
Right.
we just had the first burial in Maine, and then it was relatively shallow because the woman wanted to turn her dad into a garden, which was a really beautiful and powerful thing to do. And then all the loved ones, the friends, they all brought flowers and plants, and they put it on top of the grave, and they were sort of creating an oasis of life. So yeah, there are multiple options, I would say.
Okay, that's good to know because, like you said, there are certain regulations at times in certain places, and
Yeah,
like, for instance, in Paris, they haven't changed the burial rule since Napoleon was alive. So
yeah,
if you like a lead-lined coffin, not which many people would not, but I hope that the work we do and you do inspire change, and I know it will. I know
yeah.
people will look at this and change the way things are done. And with that being said, how has your projects and products been received in Europe? Being there are quite a lot of differences in a lot of different countries. We have the luxury of this one country with two neighbors, so you
Yeah.
have a lot.
Yeah, we have a lot of neighbors and a lot of different cultures, and it's fascinating. Actually, when I first started, I found it, to be honest, a little bit scared to be in the funeral industry because my friends were getting like a normal job, and I was like, oh my god, I have this idea and I really love it, but I'm just afraid for the industry because, well, I get depressed being around that all the time. But I learned, if you are more involved with that, you're actually super grateful that you're alive. So actually, the absence of death makes you almost depressed, which I found rather interesting. But I said to myself, okay, I gave myself 1 year, and I just need to bury one person in a mushroom casket. Then probably it will be news, and all over the world, people will have had the thought, hey, I can become part of nature, meaning I am nature. And it was for me important because somewhere in Greek philosophy, we put ourselves above nature and not like as part of. So that was sort of the idea. But then it happened after 6 months. We get inquiries from all over the world, learning about cultures and what they do in India, which was of course far away. But even in Germany, it's super funny. Like Germans have an, I wouldn't call it an obsession, but a preference for white as the color. So, or the eggs in Germany that are white are more expensive than the brown eggs. And the Netherlands is the complete opposite. It's the same egg, but in our country, the brown one is more expensive. So, or mushroom casket, since it's white, it threw pretty high eyes in Germany from the start. So even without us doing anything, we got like lots of orders. Until this date, we're super proud and grateful to have already helped over 2,500 families across Europe. And now, yeah, now then the first family in the US, and hopefully, yeah, we can serve more families here soon.
Oh, that's great, Bob. I mean, that's actually very impressive. I mean, that's numbers that probably people haven't heard, and I'm sure that that raises some eyebrows. I mean, because you guys are kind of at the beginning of this, and it will certainly grow. And you have touched a few times a little bit about, let's talk a little bit about the launch in the United States
Yeah, of
and how
course.
that, and a little bit about that first burial, and maybe what type of impact or how that made you feel.
Yeah, wow. So we had from the start when we launched, we already got inquiries from the US. And then we get very personal letters like, hey, this is my dad. He's been sick for a very long time. He loves sustainability. Give me your product. And then we're like, it was just me in a university surrounding. Like I didn't have any tools. So we couldn't serve them, which of course hurts if you cannot help somebody. So we said this, what was it? Yeah, the 6th of June, it was World Environment Day. So we planned everything. We said, hey, on World Environment Day, we're giving a gift to nature that you now can have a positive footprint when you die. So we had everything prepared, all the warehouses. And then the weekend before, somebody called us and said like, hey, I need your casket because we have a burial. And we said, hey, we actually now have products available. So you can become the first one if you want. And they were, yeah, they were quite excited. And we, of course, felt very honored. We visited them in Maine. We were part of the burial ceremony. So for us, yeah, one of the guys that was with us, was his first time in America. Um, so it was quite an experience. And then we went afterwards to New York, San Francisco, and Boston in only 4 days. So I texted you that I slept for 14 hours. Um, so it was very, very. I mean, a successful launch. We had a first burial. We had a lot of marketing in terms like the Wall Street Journal wrote about us. We onboarded funeral partners like yourself. And yeah, I think we have a challenge that we have to sort of go about together because each moment we're talking here, glue is going into the soil, healthy trees are being cut. And I mean, from an environmental point of view, like everybody understands, it's very sad, but also from a practical and business point of view, it doesn't make sense to grow an organism for 30 years and then burn it in 1 minute. If we can grow products in 7 days and that actually have a positive footprint instead of like why pollute when you can enrich?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think what's really interesting is that, you know, death has been a taboo subject. And, as unfortunate as COVID was, the silver lining was that it allowed us as human beings to look at our mortality and start to say to ourselves, what do I want? And what do I want for my children in the future? And that's changed the game in many ways. And, Bob, I appreciate what you do. And I've said to people for years, imagine a world where every living human being planted a living memorial instead of having a headstone.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
would the impact of that be?
yeah,
It would be
yeah,
pretty significant. So you're doing great work.
yeah.
And, we know you're in North America now and you're in Europe. Do you have plans of further expansion into other countries and continents?
No, I think for now we're focusing on Europe and Northern America. One of the things we're focusing on, of course, is like we raised capital in the Netherlands. We did it actually via equity crowdfunding. So individuals like yourselves could invest from already 250 euros onwards. We got invested 5 million because people believe in the idea and they feel like, hey, it's something that we should support. We built a growing facility in Europe. And now, of course, we have to ship everything to the US. From an environmental point of view, it's not ideal. So we, of course, want to build a growing facility here. But we first need to show a little bit more sales so we can attract investors to say, hey, this is actually working. So that's the plan that we're building. And therefore, we need everybody's help to make this success. And then, perhaps after that, I don't know where we're going. We got a lot of interest from Australia and New Zealand, but of course with the bio laws they have there, it might be a little bit more challenging. But yeah, who knows?
Well, Bob, I can tell you when I started in this 20 years ago, I had one and I told my wife that was enough. And then I said I'd stop at 5 and I'd stop at 10 and now we're at 15. But as long as we continue to educate, help people, and help
Yep.
change the world, I'm going to do what it takes to do that. So, with that being said, where do you envision Loop in 5 to 10 years? I mean, what would be your ultimate goal, for your product and the impact it would have?
Nice. That's a very beautiful question. I really like the answer you just gave about the ripple effect. That when you die, like if everybody indeed did something positive when they die, like people are continuously dying, you're building an upward spiral instead of a downward spiral. So what's also important for me is that most businesses, when they grow or when they earn money, they hurt the environment. So talking about regenerativity, what is important for me is that we can build a company that is profitable and at the same time it's regenerative for nature. So if the company grows, it will be better for nature. And that is I think will be there in 1 or 2 years. And I think that's maybe the most important milestone for me because that signals a new era of innovation where you can, within this capitalistic model, actually do good and earn money, which often can be very challenging. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
No,
so
I
that
love
so
that
yeah.
sentiment. That's a
Sorry.
beautiful sentiment. That's a beautiful sentiment because, at the end of the day, and as a businessman, and in particular in a country like the United States, it's a bit of a dog eat dog type of atmosphere. There's always someone standing in line to replace you. But at the end of the day, what you have is your dignity, your respect, your word, and karma is a real thing. So I think when you're out there doing business, you should be doing no harm. And I think if you can do some good, there's no shame in profitability because you have to earn money to be sustainable. So I think
Exactly.
that's what to
Yeah.
understand is that even though just because someone has a business doesn't mean that its intent is not good. So I like your philosophy. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And
It is so funny. Like when I just graduated, I was like, yeah, you're probably a little bit naive. You're super open-minded, which I think is great for innovation. But then going into the business world and feeling the reality, like, yeah, I need money this month because otherwise I can't eat. So how are we going to do this? Learning all those the metrics, etc. It really inspired me. And I remember in school when I learned about people, planet, profit, and I was like, barf. Oh my god, that sounds so cliche. And I'm like, fuck, they were right all along. That's sort of the magic triangle that you put it in balance, and that's very interesting. It's a great growing journey in that sense for us as well.
Absolutely. Well, Bob, I must say, we at the GGBA appreciate what you do. We thank you for joining us today. I want our viewers to know you can learn a little more by visiting loopbiotech.com. I want to also promise the viewers, Bob, you've got such an interesting story and we've been fielding a lot of requests. So I do in the future want to invite you to a live stream and then
Yeah,
maybe we can
definitely.
get our consumers and our providers to be able to ask you the questions that are important to them. So
Yeah, and then I can bring like videos and super nice images, so everything becomes also a little bit more graphic, and we can show you the process a little bit better. Yeah, I think that will be really great.
absolutely. Well, thanks, Bob. This is Ed Bixby from the Global Green Burial Alliance with Bob Hendrikx and Loop Biotech, and it's been great. So we'll see you at the next one.
Yes, thank you, everyone.